Hello and welcome to the latest episode of The Board Masters with me, Chris Mullins, and today I'm going to be reviewing Zaberias. I think that pronunciation is correct, forgive me if I'm wrong, but this is sort of a multi-faction, dudes on a map sort of strategy war game where you're trying to take over the kingdoms of Zaberias with these relative factions, and it's designed for families. As you can see on here, it says the #1 best educational game for kids to improve counting and reading skills. So it is very family oriented, I guess, kind of like an intro to Risk type of games. So that might give you an indication of your mileage on the game. But I'm gonna, as always with my reviews, go through the 5 categories that we like to cover. So the art style and theme, the component quality, the accessibility, the replayability, and the overall gameplay. In terms of the theme, I'll dive into that first because that will probably give a bit more of an indication on the type of the game. So I love the theme. I think the artwork of these different units, or these different factions that live in Zaberias, who have lived in peace for however long, but are now at each other's throats at war, trying to take over the realm. And I love the difference in the different hordes, the factions. You've got the undead, humans, guardians, and orcs. So a little bit safe, I guess, in that you always get sort of a human and orc, and the guardians are basically elves. I really like the undead. They're a bit different. I would maybe have appreciated something a bit more unusual for me personally, but obviously it's aimed at kids, so something familiar that they can engage with is always welcome, because anything they'll engage with is going to be easier to get to the table. But I really like the theme. It comes through nicely in the gameplay. The art style is really, really nice, as you saw from the covers. You get all these different units for each faction, and they're really nicely drawn. The artwork is gorgeous, and I'm a big fan of that. It's really different with some of the units, like with the Guardians you have this giant tree guy and a sort of giant tarantula that traps people in webs, whereas the humans somehow have a mermaid. But yeah, the art style and the theme are real winners for me on this one. In terms of the component quality, I mean, what you see is what you get. Basically, you get these 4 sort of containers for each unit. The back of that, it makes up their portion of the board, so you push these together depending on how many players you have. And then you've got all your units, you've got your coins, you've got your dice there, and that's everything you need. So, as I'll cover in the accessibility, setup and teardown is basically non-existent because you're all ready to go. And storage space is a winner, especially if you've got a shelf like mine where you just need anywhere small just to slip something in is a bonus. But yeah, as you can see with the very sort of thick cardboard, the dice are held in this sort of padded sleeves, so they're really nicely held, so there's no danger of those falling out. I suppose it's 2 sides of the same coin, but you get these, they're fantastically well stored in these in terms of stability, but it can make it tricky to get out sometimes, particularly for younger kids. Oh yeah, see, they can be hard to get out, which inevitably leads to the boards getting bent a little bit, because you have to sort of bend it to tease the unit out, which is why, as you can see with many of my bits, when I hold them up, these don't really just sit in there anymore like they were probably supposed to. They certainly were when it arrived. Some of them are a bit better than others, but for me that's not really an issue because you store them together anyway, and I don't know, unless you're transporting them loose round to other people's houses regularly, and then the idea that dropping a board away from the rest of it may happen and may get lost, that could be an issue for you if that's the type of thing you do. But if you're just picking them all up, putting them together and putting them on the shelf, then it's not really an issue for me. It's a non-issue. And that may not be an issue going forward, because with Zaberias they are coming to Kickstarter in a few months' time, so These may not be the final components, so we shall see when that campaign comes live if they've made any changes or any improvements to that. In terms of the accessibility, as I mentioned, teardown and setup are non-existent on this game, which is a massive win. In terms of actually getting hold of the game, that's probably the big drawback for this title at the moment. If you're in the continental US, you can buy it through their website, which is easy, it's great, brilliant. For me in the UK, I looked at it earlier, and whilst I could buy it through their website, it actually costs more in shipping than the actual game cost, which makes it completely unfeasible, unfortunately, in terms of buying it now. Obviously, you can wait until the Kickstarter campaign launches, whenever that's going to be, and hopefully these issues will be mitigated in terms of the... I think it was just under $45 for the shipping, which, if that is mirrored in the Kickstarter campaign, I would fear it would struggle, but hopefully that wouldn't be an issue, because they will be, in theory, dealing with much bigger numbers in terms of, instead of mailing out an individual product. In terms of the accessibility of the actual game, it's a huge win. Obviously, it's aimed at families and children as a sort of secret educational tool, and as such, the rules are very quick and easy to pick up. There are some complications in terms of all of the individual units for each individual faction have their own abilities and skills and things, so you have to have those handy. At the moment, the rule book that I have is only online, and there are no reference cards or anything. Hopefully, again, that will be something that will be in the rule book, in the campaign when it does hit Kickstarter, so that you've got something easily to hand that each player can have, so they know what all of their units can do. And there are more sort of strategical aspects like ambushing and things that may take time for younger players to get used to. But I have no doubts they would. Alex hasn't had too many issues with them, and he's 9.5, but he has played a fair amount of games before, so that maybe helped. But accessibility is a big win, provided you're willing to wait for the campaign if you're outside the US. In terms of replayability, obviously there are 4 different factions. All the units have different abilities, as I've already said, so there's plenty of scope to replay within those factions, and then you have different combinations of, if you're playing 2 or 3 player, then you'll have different combinations of the factions being used, which helps. I would guess that with a campaign coming up that there's going to be more factions involved that may be included in the game, maybe add-ons down the line that are all going to have their own, again, units and strengths and weaknesses, which is only going to improve the replayability even further. But again, it's not one that you're going to be playing probably 10 years down the line. When your kids have maybe grown up, it may not be something you want to play. It's not something you're going to pull out probably on a game night with your adult friends. Certainly, well, I would, but occasionally. It's not something I would bring out every week. But it's a game where I think that having the same skill level is very important, to be honest, and I'll get into that in the gameplay, which we may as well dive into now. So, as I mentioned, in terms of the skill level, I think it does make a big difference if everyone is at a similar level. Obviously, if you're playing with your children, you can make allowances, and maybe, I know when I've played games with Alex, I deliberately make bad moves rather than, if I make a perfect move all my units, kill half of his units on the board, take over his castle, he's probably going to get in a strop, get disengaged and not want to play anymore. So you have to sort of make that balance of, okay, I'm going to make it appear that I'm really trying, but give them the opportunity to beat me, as it were. So they set up situations where they can trigger an ambush and then have that self-satisfaction that they pulled off that move and learn how to do it, so that going forward then they don't need to be given that opportunity. They can spot that opportunity for themselves. So you have to sort of use it as a teaching method for that. I have played it as a 2-player game, just me and Mr. Brown, and I really actually enjoyed that. That was probably my favourite playthrough, because even though it's not really designed, I guess, for 2-player, it's probably more a 3 to 4 player game. I really like that tug of war element where you're pushing and pulling against each other, and eventually, one falls to the wayside. Although I suppose at that player count is a bit more susceptible to, if you get 2 or 3 bad dice rolls in a row, then it's very hard to pull that back. In terms of the mechanics, when Mr. Brown played it, he compared it to Might and Magic, which is always a winning endorsement for me. I love the player powers. I love the strategy of, when do you upgrade your cities? Which cities do you take over? Because if you're in a 4-player game, you're going to have 4 of these maps together, and your city starts down here. You could be trying to take up someone up here on a map, so you don't want all your cities to be close. You might want to spread them out, but if you're spreading them out, then obviously they're more vulnerable. Which units do you bring in at which times? Which units do you want to target at which times? For a game that markets itself as for children, there is an awful lot of strategy, so it can be very, very fun. Like I said, if you've got a game group of the same skill level, because if you've got one player there who maybe isn't familiar with the game, and you've got 3 expert strategists, they're going to get destroyed very quickly, and that's no fun for them at all, really. But if you're all sort of level pegging and you're going at each other, you're chipping away at each other, then that is a lot of fun. I suppose on the flip side of that, you do then have the issues of, if you're playing more than 2 players, inevitably you're going to have to team up to target someone, and if you're on the receiving end of that team up, it's never going to feel fun, because you're going to be struggling to make any headway. And that's sort of the same with any board games, really, any competitive board games, when you're looking to eliminate players and there is actual strategy and not just luck like in a Monopoly type situation. But inevitably there's no way you can all attack different people and have it come to a natural conclusion. So somebody's going to get eliminated early, and then the other 2 are going to fight between themselves, and that's maybe exacerbated a bit more at 4-player, where either you'll just play forever because none of you want to team up and you're all taking ground off each other, or you team up to eliminate someone, then they're out of the game early and they've got to go off and find something else to do, while you probably then keep your team up to eliminate someone else and try and pick the time to sort of turn on each other, or just eliminate that third person, so then you can go as a 2-player head-to-head. So again, it's going to depend on your mileage on that type of game for your group and your family and things like that. For us as a family, we tend to prefer co-ops, so that we avoid that sort of situation where you're ganging up on someone and then they're out of the game and either have to sit around and wait for you to finish, or they're no longer part of the game. So for me, I wish there was some sort of round system to mitigate it, kind of like a blood rage scenario, where, I don't know, after a set period of time, maybe there's a point system. So after 10 goes, you will total your points up, so that it's not just eliminate someone then wait until the next person's eliminated. But that's just for me personally, because as I said, we tend to prioritize the cooperative stuff, because then everyone's engaged all the way through and you're working together, you're a team. And whilst we enjoy competitive stuff, it tends to be more games like probably traditional stuff like Cluedo, where you don't really get players eliminated as such. But again, if your game group likes that elimination style game, this is phenomenal for that, because the core of the game is excellent. It really is. The strategy is really fun, and we really, really, really enjoyed that strategy. It's just, it inevitably gets to that point where either the game goes on forever, or you have to team up and gang up on someone, which isn't the sort of game that we necessarily enjoy all the time. It's something that we'll pick up and play now and again, but it's not something like Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle that is regularly on the table, because we love the team up aspect of that. This is never going to replace that for us. But in terms of the overall score, I'm going to give it an 8 at this point, because there's a lot here that I really, really enjoy, and a lot that my group and my family really enjoy. But there are things that are negatives for us, as I said, like the team up aspect and the ongoing play style. And there are some issues with the components that may make it difficult. If, little people trying to pull these bits out are going to struggle. And, these are all aspects that hopefully will be improved in the Kickstarter, because the replayability could well be improved dramatically with a couple of extra factions. The components may well not be the final components. Who knows? And with a few little tweaks, this would easily get another point or even 2 to get up to that, pushing a 10 and be on that same sort of pedestal as Cora Quest, which we played a lot on the channel, and has that cooperative aspect that we love. And this is probably the equivalent, but in a competitive realm. So again, if your game group or your family prefer the competitive games, add a point. If not, stick with the 8. But I am a fan of Zaberias. I can't wait to see what the campaign is going to throw out. Like I said, hopefully some extra factions and maybe some additional game modes or something where you have a time aspect and it's a point system or something, rather than just play until you're the last man standing, which could take a long time. But that is everything I've got to say on Zaberias, so thank you very much for watching. Look after yourself, stay safe, and have a good one. Bye bye now.